In the next 2 hours, I'm giving you the complete orange pill on Bitcoin. I made 10 Bitcoin videos for close friends and family, and then almost 50,000 people watched them. But people kept sharing just one video to explain Bitcoin to others. That's like taking 1/10 of your medication. It won't work. So here's the complete dose. But I do need to warn you, once you see how broken our money system actually is, you can't unsee this. And it's not pretty. But the good news, there is a solution. So here's what we'll cover. First, 6 simple concepts. Anyone can understand these to explain what Bitcoin actually is. A riddle that you have to know the answer to before Bitcoin makes any sense. 5 rules that prove Bitcoin is the first global free market ever. Then I'll show you what a real global free market would actually look like. This will blow your mind. The real world uses happening right now, including people benefiting from Bitcoin who haven't even heard of it. Why Bitcoin's bubble refuses to pop. But also, more importantly, every way Bitcoin could fail, because you need to understand the risks first. 3 simple things that every Bitcoiner should do, but most don't. I've spent thousands of hours researching this. You'll get it all in 2. 10 chapters, fully timestamped. By the end, you'll understand Bitcoin better than 99% of people and see the proof of why it's inevitable. I heard Michael Saylor explain Bitcoin like this.
Half of the wealth in the world, $450 trillion, is invested in assets in search of a long-term store of value. People just want to engage in long-term capital preservation. Well, the use case is you get to keep your money. That's actually the epiphany.
Just for context, Bitcoin currently has a market value of $2 trillion. So my first thought, here's another rich guy pumping his Bitcoin bags. Then I stumbled upon an explanation of Bitcoin that made me stop what I was doing and just stare at my screen. Give me 20 minutes and I'll share the exact explanation with you. No unexplained technical jargon, no investment hype, just 6 fundamental concepts that transform Saylor's seemingly outrageous claim into the most logical statement I've ever heard. And once you see it, I promise you can't unsee it. Fair warning, this took me about 5 years to understand, and I know I still have a lot more to learn. So I'm going to try to save you all that time by showing you exactly what finally clicked for me. But first, what is Bitcoin? It's digital peer-to-peer money that anyone can use, like handing someone cash directly, but online without any middleman. So let me address what you're probably thinking. Don't we already have a perfectly good money system that works digitally? I used to think exactly the same thing. I can send money to friends instantly, tap my phone to pay at stores, and check my bank balance anywhere. So what problem is Bitcoin actually solving? Quick question here. Which would you rather have? $1,000 that someone else controls when, where, and how much you can spend, or $1,000 that is truly yours to spend as you please? Keep that answer in mind. The issue is that our entire financial system runs on trust. A trust that's been broken repeatedly throughout history. You trust banks to actually have your money. But remember bank runs in 2008 or the Silicon Valley bank collapse in 2023. When everyone tries to withdraw at once, we discover that trust was just an illusion. And these weren't numbers on a spreadsheet. These were people who couldn't buy groceries because their bank temporarily froze withdrawals. You trust governments not to print too much money. Yet, since 2020, about 80% of all US dollars in existence were created in just 3 years. Seen the price of eggs lately? You trust payment processors to transfer your money until they decide you've violated some policy and freeze your account, which became increasingly common during COVID as processors became more risk averse and implemented stricter fraud detection measures. Now imagine playing poker where the casino dealer not only plays against you, but also controls the rules, counts the chips, and can print more chips whenever they start losing. That's our current financial system. But your kids might grow up never needing to ask a bank for permission to use their own money. That future already exists. Most people just don't know it yet. But here's what I couldn't figure out. If trust is the problem, how do you create money without needing to trust anyone? The answer involves something that sounds impossible. And before Bitcoin, it seems like it was impossible. But I was too smart to just trust it, as it was clearly a Ponzi scheme, just making people money by selling it to the next sucker. Then I discovered the explanation that changed everything. One thing confused me more about anything else about Bitcoin. How do you create digital money that can't just be copied infinitely? Think about it. If I email you a photo, now we both have the photo. But money can't work that way. If I send you $20, I shouldn't still have the $20. This is called the double spending problem, and for decades computer scientists considered it unsolvable without a central authority. If this feels like a lot, don't worry, it'll all click together by the end, I promise. Banks solve this problem by keeping a central record of all the transactions. If I try to spend the same $20 twice, the bank says, sorry, you've already spent that. But this brings us back to trust. You're trusting the bank's record. So the first thing to understand Bitcoin is the double spending problem, the core challenge that Bitcoin had to solve to work as digital money. Many people tried to solve this before, and some came close, such as BitGold or B-Money, but none of them had all 5 of the next concepts that I'm about to cover, which made them pretty much worthless eventually. So to understand how Bitcoin fixed the double spending problem, we need to understand the next 5 concepts first, and then we'll come back to this. For the next concept, imagine a massive spreadsheet shared by millions of people. Everyone can see every transaction ever made. When someone sends Bitcoin, instead of just one bank updating its private records, thousands of computers around the world verify and record that transaction. Think of it like a magic notebook at school that makes a perfect copy of itself for everyone in the class. You can only add new pages once you've solved a tricky puzzle and everyone agrees you're right. The system then adds this new page to everyone's notebook. Once something is written, not even the teacher can erase it. This was my first holy crap moment. Someone had actually solved digital trust. Bitcoin is designed so that each new page takes about 10 minutes to add. If the puzzle gets too easy, it automatically becomes harder, and vice versa. This completely eliminates the need for a trusted middleman, since each block contains verified transactions that everyone can see. So the second concept to understand about Bitcoin is blockchain technology. And for the based viewers out there, you might call this the time chain. This public ledger records all transactions in chronological order. But this doesn't explain how new Bitcoins are created, which led me deeper down the rabbit hole. When I first heard about Bitcoin miners, I pictured people with digital pickaxes hunting for internet gold. Seriously, you've probably heard Bitcoin mining described as solving complex math problems, which sounds both boring and confusing. In fact, mining is actually more like a global lottery with a genius twist. Instead of buying tickets, you buy electricity to power computers that make trillions of guesses every second. Everyone's trying to crack an insanely tricky combination lock by feeding 3 things into Bitcoin's cryptographic function. 1, the previous block, 2, new transactions, and 3, a random number. This spits out a 64-character code, and you win it if it starts with enough zeros. Remember how blockchain creates a new block every 10 minutes? The system automatically adjusts. If someone wins it too quickly, it requires more zeros at the start. If it takes too long, fewer zeros. The catch? This lottery has driven some of the most innovative thinking to find the cheapest renewable electricity on the planet, advancing the world's renewable energy technology while creating the most secure money system ever built. This is because the first person to find the winning output gets 2 rewards. 1, they add the new page of transactions to Bitcoin's ledger, receiving transaction fees. And 2, they receive brand new Bitcoins, currently 3.125 Bitcoin. Here's something wild. Right now, while you're watching this, Bitcoin has processed another block. Somewhere in the world, someone just won over $300,000 for keeping your future money safe. You can check this out yourself on this website. And here's why this matters. For the first time in history, we've created something digital that requires real-world resources to produce. Oh, and more importantly, it has the next concept I'm about to cover. But just think about it. Emails, songs, photos, all can be copied infinitely for free. But Bitcoin, each one costs actual electricity to create. You can't just copy-paste more into existence. I know what you're thinking. This still sounds incredibly wasteful. I thought the same until I realised that over half of the energy comes from renewable resources, and this is growing rapidly. Oh, it also removes methane from the atmosphere, helping to reduce global warming. But more on this another time. So the third concept to understand about Bitcoin is mining, the process that secures the network and creates new Bitcoins through real-world energy expenditure. Okay, so far we've got digital money that can't be copied and a global guessing game that creates value. If you're thinking this sounds like science fiction, join the club. But this raises an obvious question. Surely there's a way for computer geeks to hack this system. Well, did you know anyone with an internet connection and a laptop can run a Bitcoin node? Yes, even you, James. A node is simply a computer that keeps a copy of the entire Bitcoin ledger and checks that everyone is following the rules. This can be done on the laptop you own for free or a special computer you buy for a few $100s specifically for running a node. When miners find a solution and try to add a new block, all these independent nodes verify everything is legitimate. If someone tries to cheat, say by giving themselves extra Bitcoin, the nodes will reject their block. This is why the Bitcoin motto is, don't trust, verify. It's like having millions of independent auditors checking the books 24/7. No single person or organization can change the rules without the vast majority of users agreeing. Plot twist. You could become one of these auditors tonight. Download the software and you're officially helping secure the first global free market that has ever existed. I'll leave a 5-minute video in the description below which shows you how to do this. Like most people, I thought having no CEO made Bitcoin sketchy, not realizing this was actually its superpower. But here's what makes Bitcoin truly unique. It's immaculate conception. Unlike every other cryptocurrency, Bitcoin's creator, Satoshi Nakamoto, completely disappeared after releasing it to the world. No one knows who they are, where they went, or if they're even alive. This isn't a bug, it's the feature that makes Bitcoin unstoppable. Think about it. Every other digital currency has founders, CEOs, or companies behind it that can be pressured, regulated, arrested, or corrupted. But Bitcoin, there's literally no one in charge to target. Satoshi's disappearance means Bitcoin belongs to everyone and no one simultaneously. It's like releasing the recipe for fire and then vanishing. The knowledge becomes humanity's, not any individual's. So the fourth concept to understand about Bitcoin is decentralization. No single entity controls Bitcoin. It's maintained by millions of computers worldwide, all incentivized to do so, with no central authority that can ever be compromised. But even with all this security, how is this a store of value, like Saylor claimed? It's because Bitcoin's scarcity is like nothing we've ever seen before. Only 21 million will ever exist, period. This is truly new for mankind. Throughout all of human history, every form of money has kept expanding in supply. Gold, which has been the rarest form of money for thousands of years, will double in total supply within the next 60 years. But Bitcoin, the amount that currently exists, will never double again, ever. Every 210,000 blocks, roughly every 4 years, the reward miners get is cut in half, making new Bitcoins increasingly rare. Until around the year 2140, no more new ones will ever be created. Think about that. In a world where the Fed can print trillions of dollars overnight, Bitcoin has a fixed supply that can never be changed. This isn't just digital money. It's digital gold being mined with electricity instead of shovels, but with absolute scarcity that even gold can't match. So the fifth concept to understand about Bitcoin is scarcity. Bitcoin's fixed supply that can never be changed, making it potentially the scarcest asset in human history. Now, two questions spring to mind here. One, if there's only 21 million Bitcoin, how can everyone in the world use it? And two, how do you know it will never be changed? Great questions. Here's where I got confused for months. I thought only 21 million meant regular people couldn't use it, but that's like saying there's only one pizza, so 8 people can't eat it. You slice pizza into pieces, Bitcoin splits into 100 million pieces each. That means there's 2.1 quadrillion units available, enough for every person on Earth to use. Just for reference, there's roughly around $1 quadrillion floating around in the whole world at the moment. And yes, you can buy a coffee with it. You don't need to deal in whole Bitcoins, just like you don't need a whole bar of gold to buy groceries. Secondly, changing Bitcoin's rules requires almost everyone in the Bitcoin ecosystem to agree. Users, businesses, exchanges, and miners. If some people disagree and split off, it creates a completely new token, like Bitcoin Cash did when it tried to change the block size. The free market then decides which version people actually want to use and which one becomes worthless. And you can see how many people agreed Bitcoin Cash was better. But here's the key. Asking to create more than 21 million Bitcoins is like asking everyone to make their own money worth less. For example, if you held $100,000 worth of Bitcoin and there was a new rule to make 210 million Bitcoin, your Bitcoin would now be worth $10,000. Since virtually nobody would vote to hurt themselves financially, the 21 million limit is the big rule that is impossible to change. Here's another crazy stat. There are about 56 million millionaires worldwide, but only 21 million Bitcoins will ever exist. Do the math. That's less than 0.4 Bitcoin per millionaire. So we've got perfect scarcity, but here's the mind-bending part. How do you actually own something that doesn't physically exist? This is where Bitcoin gets really clever. The question that helps me understand this was, where is Bitcoin actually stored? Bitcoin is everywhere and nowhere all at once. Unlike your bank account, which exists in an entry in your bank's database, or your emails that live on Google's servers in specific physical data centers that could theoretically be attacked or destroyed. Bitcoin exists as information spread across thousands of computers worldwide. What you actually own is not a digital coin sitting in a digital vault somewhere. You own access, specifically a private key that proves you control those Bitcoins. This key is often secured by a 12-word seed phrase. Whoever has this phrase effectively has the Bitcoin. It's what's called a bearer asset, meaning possession equals ownership, just like physical gold or cash. This is where the phrase "not your keys, not your coins" comes from. When you truly own Bitcoin, no one can freeze it, seize it, or block your transactions. No banks, no governments, no one. And yes, governments have already tried. We've been trained to think access equals ownership. When you log into your bank app, you think you're looking at your money, but you're not. You're looking at an IOU from the bank. They can freeze it, block transactions, or limit withdrawals anytime. Just stop and take a mental note of this fact. You'll never see your bank account the same way again. For example, when paying a deposit on our house, I had to go into the bank and ask for permission to send my money because it exceeded their daily limit. Or during the 2013 Cyprus crisis, the government took 47.5% of large bank deposits. That was someone's life savings gone because they trusted the wrong people with their money. And in case you hadn't realized, you and me are doing this right now with our money in the bank. They just haven't confiscated it yet. With Bitcoin, it's actually yours. So the sixth and final concept to understand about Bitcoin is digital signatures, cryptographic proof of ownership that gives you true control over your money. Wait, do you see what just happened? We accidentally built the most secure money system in human history. No banks, no governments, no single point of failure. We just described digital gold that's better than actual gold. So now that you understand all 6 concepts, let's see how they work together to solve the double spending problem. Remember the challenge? How do you prevent someone from spending the same digital money twice without trusting a central authority? Here's how Bitcoin solves double spending. Your digital signature proves you own the Bitcoin. The blockchain records every transaction publicly, so everyone can verify you haven't spent it before. Decentralized nodes check that you're following the rules. Mining makes it incredibly expensive to fake transactions. And scarcity means you can't just create fake Bitcoins. Together, they make cheating impossible without trusting anyone. This is how Bitcoin became the first digital money that works without trust, and why previous attempts like B-Money and BitGold all failed where Bitcoin succeeded. BitGold was the closest, but eventually the centralization was the key issue. If you understood all of that on your first try, you're either a genius or lying. So make sure to watch this again. But wait, If this system is so perfect, why isn't everyone using it? There is one massive obstacle that most people can't get past, and it's not what you think. But before that, here's some quick answers to the obstacles that took me years to overcome. I will dive deeper into these in future videos. But isn't it too slow for everyday transactions? The Lightning Network is built on top of Bitcoin, making transactions nearly instant with fees that are fractions of a penny. Think of it like opening a bar tab. You transact instantly all night, then settle once at the end. But Bitcoin isn't real like gold, which is used in manufacturing and jewelry. How can it have any value? Did you know less than 10% of gold's value comes from its industrial use? The other 90% comes from its monetary properties, scarcity, durability, and everyone agreeing that it's valuable. Bitcoin has these same properties, but digitally perfected. Store of value, but it goes down 80% all the time. Amazon crashed 95% in the dot-com bubble, but it was still revolutionary. Early adoption of breakthrough technology is always volatile, but it reduces over time. MicroStrategy, with billions of dollars as a public company, put their entire treasury into Bitcoin. Fidelity offers Bitcoin in retirement accounts, managing pension funds. Pension funds are very risk adverse. These aren't crypto bros gambling. They see what's coming. What happens when all Bitcoins are mined? Miners will still be incentivized to secure the network through transaction fees instead of new Bitcoin rewards. The system becomes self-sustaining through usage rather than inflation. But what is the one big obstacle most people can never get past? It's this question, which I'm sure you've thought about before too. What makes Bitcoin different from all the other cryptocurrencies? Why won't someone just create a better one? It's because Bitcoin is a protocol, like the internet, a fundamental set of rules everyone agrees to follow. You can't just build a better internet and expect everyone to abandon existing infrastructure. As I've just shown, Bitcoin checks every box for peer-to-peer digital money. It has $2 trillion invested into it. It has 15 years of perfect operation despite thousands of attacks and billions in specialized hardware securing it. The vast majority of other cryptocurrencies fall down on the decentralization hurdle. They still have founders, owners, or companies that steer the ship and could change the rules, as we've seen numerous times already with things like Ethereum. Here's the crucial point. If any of these 6 elements were missing, Bitcoin would be worthless or easily replaceable. Remove the blockchain, you're back to trusting banks. Remove mining, no security or new Bitcoin creation. Remove decentralization, someone controls your money and can change the rules anytime. Remove scarcity, it's just another printable fiat currency. Remove digital signatures, you don't truly own it. Remove the solution to double spending, it doesn't work as money. But when you combine all 6 together, you get exactly what Michael Saylor described. The perfect store of value.
Well, the use case is you get to keep your money. That's actually the epiphany.
This is why Bitcoin isn't just another investment. It's a fundamental shift from asking permission to use your own money to actually owning it. Remember his claim about $450 trillion. If Bitcoin captured that entire store of value market, each Bitcoin would be worth about $21.4 million. That's more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. This is not a prediction by any means, and I know it seems absurd, but the reason we're not there yet is simply because so few people understand these concepts. When you strip it all back to first principles, it's not because Bitcoin isn't working or not worth 450 trillion. Ideally, you won't blindly trust what I've just shared, and you'll go away and do your own research about them. And if you do see what I'm seeing, maybe we're one of the few people in a position to benefit from this understanding. But here's the truth. Most people still get Bitcoin completely wrong, even after learning everything I just said. They're missing one crucial element that changes everything. And this is something our brains are not wired to understand. To see what this is, watch this video right here. It breaks down one concept that finally made me realize why I was struggling to understand Bitcoin. Imagine you're inside a watertight stadium with a magic water dropper.
At 12 noon, it drops 1 drop. At 12:01, 2 drops. 12:02, 4 drops. And so on, doubling each minute. How long have you got until you're underwater?
Seriously, stop here and think about it. Once I understood this riddle, it completely rewired my understanding of Bitcoin. And here's the thing, human brains are simply not designed to grasp this concept, which is exactly why most people think Bitcoin's sketchy. When it finally clicked for me, Bitcoin critics suddenly sounded like people in 1995 saying, email will never replace fax machines. So seriously, let me know, what was your guess? Was it months, days, hours? The answer is 1250. Just 50 minutes later, you'd be holding your breath. But here's the kicker. At what time would the stadium be just 3% full, with only a few puddles visible? 12:45. At 12:44, you'd be wondering why I trapped you there for 44 minutes of absolutely nothing. At 12:45, you might spot some puddles if you had good eyesight. Then BAM! 5 minutes later, you're underwater. This is exponential growth. And it's the single most important concept for understanding Bitcoin that nobody talks about. And no, I'm not talking about number go up here. Here's why this matters. There are actually 3 ways this exponential pattern makes Bitcoin completely misunderstood. Bitcoin has something called the halving that happens every 4 years, roughly. Think of it like this. Imagine Pokemon cards where only ever 21 million Charizards will ever exist. At first, stores get 50 new Charizards every 10 minutes. Then one day, bam, they only get 25 new ones. 4 years later, just 12.5, then 6.25. This creates what's called a stock to flow ratio, comparing how many exist to how many new ones there are being made. Gold has a stock to flow ratio of about 62 years. Silver's is 22. Bitcoin's ratio is already around 120. But here's what's mind-blowing. In 2028, it jumps to 240, then 480 in 2032. It doubles every 4 years automatically, following that same exponential pattern from our stadium, until eventually it looks like this. But there's another doubling effect most people miss. Ever heard of Moore's Law? It's this principle some dude discovered in the 60s that showed computers get twice as powerful about every year and a half. This is why your smartphone today has more computing power than all of NASA had during the moon landing. Here's why this matters for Bitcoin. The computers that run Bitcoin, called miners, keep getting more powerful and efficient, doubling again and again. Some people panic and say, oh no, these Bitcoin computers will use up the electricity in the whole world. But they're missing the exponential efficiency gains. Technology doesn't just get more powerful, it gets more efficient too. Like how your new phone probably has better battery life than your old one, even though it can do way more stuff. This is why many experts believe Bitcoin's energy consumption will eventually peak and could even decline. Another exponential curve people can't see coming. Now, here's the most mind-blowing exponential number of all. Bitcoin's security system uses something called Secure Hash Algorithm 256. The 256 means there are 2 to the power of 256 possible combinations. But what does that actually mean? Well, there are about 10 to the power of 80 atoms in the entire universe. 2 to the power of 56 is roughly 10 to the power of 77. So there's almost as many combinations as there are atoms in the universe. Just think how many atoms there are in your fingernail. The numbers are so large, they just become meaningless. But here's how someone explained it to me. Imagine trying to find a specific grain of sand on all the beaches on Earth. Except that's still way too easy compared to breaking Bitcoin security. By the way, this same cryptographic security protects nuclear weapons, military communications, and your online banking. If SHA-256 could be broken, we'd have much bigger problems than Bitcoin. This is exponential math at its most extreme, and exactly why our brains can't process how secure Bitcoin actually is. So let's address what you're probably thinking now. Am I too late to Bitcoin? I get it. When you see Bitcoin has gone from less than a penny to over $100,000, it feels like you've missed the boat. But here's the thing.
People thought the same when the price was $100, $1,000, or even $30,000.
Most people are terrible at understanding what comes next with exponential growth. Remember our stadium? Most people think we're at 1249, with water up to our knees. But in reality, we might not even be near 1244. With just a few drops on the field. Let me show you what I mean. Bitcoin has grown at roughly 100% per year on average over a decade. Now, I don't expect that exact rate to continue forever, That would be unrealistic. So let's get conservative. What if Bitcoin only grows at 25% per year for the next 20 years? $10,000 invested today would become $867,000 in 20 years. Compare that to the stock market's historical 10% average. The same $10,000 becomes $67,300. That's an $800,000 difference. Being conservative. When critics say Bitcoin can't be valuable, has no real world use case, or uses too much energy, they're missing all three exponential patterns. They can't see the scarcity explosion coming. They don't understand the efficiency revolution, and they can't grasp the security universe. They're like someone seeing a tiny puddle at the top of a stadium, not realizing they'll be underwater in minutes. This isn't about number goes up. It's about understanding that we're still in the early stages of the most profound monetary innovation in human history. Powered by exponential math, our brains simply can't process. No money in history has ever had these three exponential properties. Ever. So here's what I want you to take away. Our brains can't process exponential growth. The doubling effect, whether in a stadium full of water or Bitcoin scarcity, it's all the same mathematical principle that we completely miss. Once you truly grasp this concept, you'll never look at Bitcoin the same way again. But if you don't understand what makes Bitcoin truly special beyond this scarcity model, knowing about exponential growth is pointless. That's why we need to know what the 5 rules are that would make the first ever global free market. If you just strip it back to first principles and Bitcoin has these 5 rules, that's exactly what it would be. Why are some of the smartest people in the world completely obsessed with Bitcoin, while other equally smart people dismiss it as a total scam? The answer comes down to 5 simple rules that most people have never heard of. Here's what I'll show you. First, what makes Bitcoin fundamentally different from every form of money that's ever existed. Second, why Bitcoin isn't actually competing with other cryptocurrencies at all. And third, the hidden pattern that explains why Bitcoin could become as inevitable as the internet itself.
I should say these 5 rules actually come from Jeff Booth, the author of Price of Tomorrow.
A system bounded by energy will reprice all $900 trillion of assets. All.
But I made them easier to remember with my DOPES framework. And I'll also explain each concept in simple terms.
By the end of this video, you'll understand Bitcoin better than 95% of people, including most investors. But first, let me show you why my 4-year-old sees money more clearly than most adults. Look at this image. Which one here is the odd one out?
If you're like most adults, you'll probably say,
that one is pretend money.
But most kids say this.
That one, because it's like coined.
Kids see reality more clearly. Adults apply social concepts about what real money means. This is exactly why Bitcoin is revolutionary. The only way to understand it is to go back to first principles and try and forget everything you know about money. Bitcoin requires energy to create it. That's why it's called proof of work. It's the first digital thing that can't just be copied and pasted infinitely like a meme. Each Bitcoin is earned by computers making trillions of guesses per second to find a special number, like a digital treasure hunt that costs real electricity. That's completely different from our current money, which banks create by typing numbers on a keyboard. I'm not joking, that's literally how it works. Bitcoin is like a bodybuilder who has to lift real weight to build muscle. Banks are like Instagram influencers using filters and angles. So rule number 1 is that Bitcoin is bounded by energy. This means your Bitcoin can't be devalued by someone printing more. But wait, if Bitcoin requires energy, who decides how much energy gets used? Who controls the system and these rules? This is where it really gets interesting. Here's something most people don't realize. Money has always had someone in charge of it. Always. Even gold, which was supposed to be free money, got confiscated in 1933 when government said, sorry, this is ours now. Then they devalued the dollar overnight in 1934, cutting everyone's purchasing power by 70%.
Well, unless they held gold, of course, but
When that wasn't enough, they completely removed money from gold in 1971. Nixon said they were
to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold.
That was 54 years ago. Some temporary fix. But what happens when money has no one in charge, no one who can change the rules, no one who can make more just because they want to. It's like playing a game where no one can suddenly say, I'm changing the rules because I'm losing. Bitcoin is special because nobody controls it anymore. The creator, Satoshi Nakamoto, disappeared. Some people see this as a negative. There's no CEO to complain to, but this is actually what makes Bitcoin unique, the Immaculate Conception. Nearly all other cryptocurrencies still have their creators making decisions and changing rules. Bitcoin is the first unchangeable set of rules we've ever had. This means no one can freeze your account or change the rules on you. So rule number 2 is that Bitcoin is decentralized. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The core rules that matter can't be changed because no one would ever agree to make their own investment worth less. Want proof this works? In 2017, Bitcoin Cash tried to change one of the core rules, block size, claiming it would make Bitcoin faster. But bigger blocks would make Bitcoin more centralized, because normal people like you and me would be priced out of running nodes. What makes it so secure is that there are thousands of nodes across the world, basically a system on a computer which checks Bitcoin is still working properly. There's no way for anyone to manipulate or destroy them. By the way, did you know you can run a node for pennies worth of electricity a month on your laptop? Check the description for a 5-minute video on how to do this. Anyway, what happened to Bitcoin Cash? The free market voted with their money, and you can see how that ended up. But here's what makes Bitcoin special. It's alive. The code can be improved for technical issues. Things like the SegWit upgrade have made Bitcoin better without changing what makes it Bitcoin. Think of it like this. You can renovate a house, but you can't change the foundation. Bitcoin's foundation, the 21 million limit, the decentralization, proof of work, that's locked in forever. Quantum computing threat, Bitcoin can upgrade its cryptography. Someone finds a way to attack it. Thousands of developers worldwide can fix it. It's proven already that it's anti-fragile. Each attack has made Bitcoin better and stronger and more decentralized. The secret is in how Bitcoin is built. Imagine 2 lemonade stands. At the first one, anyone can help make the lemonade better. If you have a good idea, you can suggest it, and everyone who contributes gets rewarded based on how much they help to improve the lemonade. At the second stand, only official employees with special permission can make suggestions. Plus, they get paid the same regardless of the outcome. Which lemonade stand makes better lemonade? This is why open source systems like Bitcoin always win. They get the best ideas from the whole world. Look at Linux. It's open source, which is why your Android phone, Tesla, and even the internet itself run better and more securely than closed systems. Thousands of brilliant minds working together will always beat a small team working in secret. So rule number 3 is that Bitcoin is an open network. The members only lemonade stand wastes time checking permission slips and guarding their secret recipe. The open stand focuses all energy on making better lemonade. Now you might be thinking, wait, if anyone can contribute, couldn't someone break it? Here's the genius part. The 4th rule ties everything together, and it's not what most people think. I used to think Bitcoin was secure because of fancy math, but that's just the tool. The real reason is much cooler. It's like a neighborhood where everyone's life savings are stored in their own houses. So everyone really wants to keep it safe, instead of just relying on locks and alarms. Miners spend millions on equipment that becomes worthless if Bitcoin fails. Bitcoin owners don't want it hacked, so they run nodes to protect it. And developers want their creation to survive. This creates something that doesn't depend on rules or police. It's something much more powerful than that. It depends on people looking out for themselves. It's like how you don't need a rule to stop you from hitting yourself with a hammer. You just naturally avoid it because, duh. This forces honesty because cheating hurts you more than anyone else. So rule number 4 is that Bitcoin is secure. Hey, that rhymes. When I first understood this, I literally stopped the video I was watching and said, holy crap. But then I discovered something that made me realize this isn't just revolutionary. It's inevitable. And this changed how I see Bitcoin compared to everything else. Here's a question. Why do we still use email, even though it's old and terrible? I mean, who actually likes email? No one. Email sucks, but we use it because everyone else uses it. That's not competition. That's inevitability.
I know this probably still sounds a bit abstract. This took me ages to get my head around it, but it's just like asking everyone to throw away the internet, rip up all their fiber optic cables and build a whole new one from scratch just because someone created the Internet 2.0, which just basically does the same thing. Nobody's going to do that when all the infrastructure is already laid and everyone's connected and it works perfectly fine. So the thing to get your head around here is that Bitcoin isn't just software. It's mining farms in Texas, nodes in people's basement, with billions in infrastructure already spent on these systems. This infrastructure isn't just going to switch when we already have a decentralized, secure digital money that is working and has a 16-year track record.
Think of it like rules of a game that everyone agrees to play by. Once everyone agrees the same rules, it's almost impossible to get them to switch. When I understood this, I realized all those Bitcoin killers were like someone trying to invent a new version of football where you use your hands. Sure, it might work better in theory, but good luck getting everyone to switch. Bitcoin isn't just digital money, it's a protocol. And here's the key. Protocols are winner take all, not winner take most. So rule number 5 is that Bitcoin is a protocol. Most people think Bitcoin competes with thousands of other cryptocurrencies like Apple competes with Samsung, but protocols don't work that way. Bitcoin has the largest network, most users, most infrastructure. It's becoming the standard like the TCP/IP is for the internet. This means betting against Bitcoin is like betting against the internet in 1995. And we all know how that would have worked out. And just for context, how many people do you know that don't use the internet today? Exactly. I first heard these rules from Jeff Booth.
An open, decentralized, secure protocol bounded by energy. As long as it stays decentralized and secure, that system bounded by energy will reprice all $900 trillion of assets. All.
But by the next day, I'd forgotten them. So here's what I did to remember them. I just remembered dopes. Decentralized, open, protocol bounded by energy that's secure. No one controls it or can change it. Anyone can use it without permission. The winner takes all, like the internet. It costs electricity, so it can't just be copied infinitely. Everyone that uses it wants to protect it. When these 5 things combine, they create something that's never existed before. The first global free market. I heard this on a podcast when gardening and I had to stop what I was doing. The penny dropped. I realized why some of the smartest people in the world are so obsessed with Bitcoin and why equally smart people completely miss it. It's not about the technology, it's about recognizing a pattern that's never existed before. I'm not exaggerating when I say this completely changed how I see the world. Once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. This is why Bitcoin isn't just internet money. It's a complete game changer in how humans will cooperate. For the first time ever, we have a level playing field, whether you're the president of the US or a farmer in rural Africa. Everyone follows the same rules that nobody can change for their own benefit. Look, even if you understand everything I just explained about the 5 rules of money, it means nothing if you don't understand the answer to this question. What do you think happens when money actually works for everyone? I'm talking about a world where creators get paid fairly, where each year everyone gets richer without doing anything extra, and where the best ideas win instead of whoever has the most connections. You might think this is just theory, but I recently discovered something that completely blew my mind. Artists and creators are already doing this right now, and the results are shocking. You need to watch this next video to see what happens when money actually works for everyone. Oh, and there's one story about a musician who tried something completely different with his latest release, and what happened in the first few hours changed how I think about money forever.
So your granddad bought a house on a teacher's salary in 3 years. You need over 7 years today, assuming prices don't keep rising. But here's what they don't want you to know. Your money should buy more every year, not less. And there's a specific moment when they broke this system. So what actually happens when money works for everyone? I spent the last 10 years going down way too many rabbit holes about money, and 3 discoveries change everything. First, there's a specific moment when money's natural system got completely broken, and I can show you the before and after. Second, what happens when all 8 billion people start competing to make your life better instead of a few hundred taking from everyone else? Third, this is already starting to happen in ways that sound impossible. But this isn't just about money. It's about whether your kids will ever be able to afford a home and the type of world they'll live in. So here's the first thing that blew my mind. I first heard about this idea from Jeff Booth, the author of The Price of Tomorrow. But it took me years to really get it because it's the complete opposite of everything we see.
You almost have to say it 1,000 times to yourself. The natural state of the free market is deflation. Yeah. Which means you've never lived in one. No, never.
In a natural free market, everything should get cheaper every year while getting better. I know that sounds crazy. We're so used to inflation that the idea of deflation sounds like a disaster. But here's the thing. Deflation with our current monetary system actually would be a disaster. That's because our system needs constant inflation to work. It wasn't designed to work as a global free market. It's designed for something else entirely, which I'll show you soon. But first, let me show you why things should cost less each year in a true free market. Think about your smartphone. In the 1960s, you could buy a calculator called the Sharp CS10A, costing $1,500. That's about 14K in today's money. Today, your phone can solve any math problem the Sharp could and access way more through the internet, and it's basically free. Here's what clicks for me. Every year, humans get better at making things. Better technology, smarter processes, better designs. Farmers learn how to grow more food with less work. Car makers figure out how to make cars safer with fewer materials. Engineers design phones that are more powerful but cost less to make. This improvement should make you richer by making everything cheaper. That's how the world is supposed to work. Your money should buy more each year, not less. But our world does the exact opposite. I found this perfect example from Mike Maloney's series, The Hidden Secrets of Money.
This is my father. He was manager of an auto parts store, and here's his tax return from 1955.
He made $9,600 per year, paid 12% in taxes, and the average home cost, $8,500. He made more per year than his house cost. Today, that same job pays $70,000 with 25% taxes, but houses cost $415,000. Instead of making more than a house costs, he now makes only 20% of what a house costs. But here's what really got me. We've had 70 years of amazing technology improvements since 1955. We have power tools, robots, better materials, and computer design. Building a house should be way cheaper today, not 50 times more expensive. So what happened? Now, I want to be clear, the world before 1971 wasn't perfect. There was still plenty of government control, limited global communication, and most people couldn't participate in global markets like we can today, thanks to better technology. Even the gold standard had major problems. Governments took gold from citizens in 1933. It was better than what we have today, but governments could still control it. Now, I know all this inflation, deflation thing sounds a little bit confusing, so I just remembered a talk I saw in Bitcoin Prague by Dominic Frisby. Let him explain this a little bit better.
What you see here is the consumer price index in the UK and the US over the course of the 19th century when money was gold. And over the course of the next 40 years when money was sound, you saw that prices more than halved. In other words, the same wage over the course of that 40 years would have bought you double as much.
And that is an example of what happens in a sound money system. Throughout history, they'd slowly make currencies worse by mixing in cheaper metals or printing more paper currency. It may look different across cultures and centuries, but every government has eventually done the same thing to money. Slowly debase it until people lose faith and it becomes worthless. Don't believe me? In 1971, Nixon removed the US dollar and every currency from gold. And here's the thing, they knew exactly what they were doing. Catherine Austin Fitts, who worked with President Bush in the late 80s, exposed this perfectly.
He said, we are going to hollow out the middle class in the West, and we are going to devastate our culture. All to make culture? Money. Yes, our culture. We're going to devastate our culture.
The system wasn't broken by accident. It was designed for extraction, not abundance. Now, I've got to be honest, when I first heard this, it didn't really click for me. But when you really strip it back to first principles, inflation is theft. And I'm going to prove it to you. If I printed £20 notes in my spare room and then bought my weekly food shops, that would be called theft. When the Bank of England does this exact same thing with billions, they just call it quantitative easing. And here's the proof. With £1,000 in your savings account in 2020, you could buy about 10 weekly food shops at £100 each. With that same £1,000 in 2025, you can only buy about 6 weekly food shops at over £150 each. So who stole the 4 weekly food shops? Here's exactly how the theft happened, and this is directly from the Bank of England's own documents. First, the Bank of England announces quantitative easing. Next, the Bank of England buys bonds from asset managers and investors. Third, these people now have cash instead of bonds. Fourth, they use this cash to buy houses, stocks, and other assets. Fifth, asset prices jump. Sixth, your weekly food shop rises. And then seventh, your wages rise maybe 12 months later, if you're lucky. And each time they do this, they call it something different and use different methods to try and keep people confused. But it always has the same effect because they receive the new money first. Look, this is the definition of theft: taking someone's property without consent. Your property is your purchasing power. Without consent, you didn't vote to devalue your savings. By taking the new money diluted everyone's existing money. You worked for that purchasing power, but they printed it and spent it before you even knew what happened. That's not economics, that's theft. This is essentially the Keynesian versus the Austrian economics debate, and you can learn way more about this in books like The Bitcoin Standard. And this is exactly the opposite of natural deflation. Instead of technology making things cheaper for you, money printing makes everything more expensive.
And then over the course of the 20th century, something happened. Money changed, it became fiat, and suddenly the consumer price index has gone absolutely bananas.
I saw Jack Mallers speak at Bitcoin Prague, and he shows this data perfectly.
This is the 95th percentile's growth in wealth versus the rest of us. All in 1971, that's weird.
And the social breakdown doesn't stop there. People are waiting longer to get married because they can't afford to start families. Divorce rates are skyrocketing as financial stress tears relationships apart. We're eating less real food and more processed junk, with childhood obesity tripling. Birth rates are plummeting as people can't afford children. And even more people are going to prison as financial stress pushes them towards crime. So instead of technological progress making you richer through falling prices, money printing makes you poorer through rising prices. Our wages simply cannot keep up with the amount of money being printed and pumped into certain assets. The wealth gains that should benefit everyone get captured by whoever gets the new money first. And here's the crazy part. We live like kings compared to people 100 years ago. We have smartphones, the internet, GPS, cars that are way safer. We've made incredible technology progress. But instead of feeling more wealthy, we're more stressed than ever. Jack's data shows
there are more people 18 to 29 living in their parents' house because they're depressed and they're jobless and they're in debt than there was during the Great Depression. That's weird.
So we have the technology of kings, but the money stress of peasants, because our money system is stealing the benefits of all that progress. So every year we wait to move into a global free market, we're getting poorer while working harder. But imagine a different world. Jeff Booth describes it perfectly.
I see a world with 8 billion people in service of 8 billion people.
What does this actually mean? In a global free market, everyone on Earth would be competing to make your life better and cheaper. Here's how it works. In a real free market, you get paid by creating value for other people. The more people you help, the more money you earn. But then someone sees your success and thinks, I can do that better for less money. So they compete with you. So you have to get even better and cheaper to keep customers. This forces everyone to keep improving and lowering prices. Remember, prices should be falling because of this competition and technology progress. It still sounds like a fairy tale, right? Well, here's a real example. A calculator that cost $1,500 in the 60s dropped to $150 in the 70s, $30 in the 80s, $10 in the 90s, and today it's free on your phone. This is happening everywhere that technology touches. For example, Netflix made entertainment cheaper than cable TV. Amazon made shopping cheaper and faster. Your phone replaced a $10,000 camera, a $500 GPS, $200 iPod, and a $100 calculator. Uber made rides cheaper than taxis. And eventually, with self-driving cars and a digital payment system, your car could actually start to make you money whilst you're sleeping. But the scam money system is conflicting with this. Here's what I mean. Think about our food. And here's where it gets really sneaky. Big food companies spend millions lobbying politicians who then use your tax money to subsidize corn, soy, and sugar. The exact ingredients these food companies need to maximize their profits by keeping food on shelves longer. Remember, they knew what they were doing. Catherine Austin Fitts said,
and we're going to devastate the quality of the food supply.
He said that?
Yes.
Look at this proof. Chipotle's burrito with real chicken, beans, and vegetables costs £12.95. McDonald's processed sausage and egg McMuffin meal costs £6.99. Think about it. McDonald's food needs factories, preservatives, and industrial processing. Chipotle just grilled chicken and mixed vegetables. The more processed food should cost more, not less. This is exactly backwards, and it's only possible because your taxes subsidize McDonald's ingredients, plus the politicians give them tax breaks while real food gets nothing. Funny enough, I was just speaking to a friend about this who creates smoothie pouches that help people get more fiber. And he was seeing in real time how he doesn't get any tax breaks or benefits, whereas other companies that put in these unhealthy products get these benefits. You're literally paying taxes to make junk food cheaper than real food. Then you are paying again when it makes you sick. Without these rigged subsidies, healthy food would become the cheap option because that's what people would choose. And entrepreneurs would figure out how to make it even cheaper. So what would this world look like in the workplace? I know a lot of people are freaking out about AI taking over people's jobs, but here's what Jeff Booth has to say.
In the world I describe on Bitcoin, prices fall by exactly the rate that those people go.
Wait, what? Why?
The productivity that we choose, the prices fall by that. They don't need the job anymore, because prices keep falling and falling and falling.
Oh my God, okay.
I know this sounds unreal, but think about it from first principles. If everything is getting cheaper every year and AI is automating more and more jobs, we simply wouldn't need to work as much. Families could go back to one person working, which was the norm just 50 years ago. Then that person working 20 hours a week, potentially just 5 hours a week, and getting richer the entire time as prices keep falling. I know this sounds impossible, but use that car example I gave you earlier where your car could actually start paying you money. The same thing could actually happen with your heating bills. What if there was a way that you could heat your house and get paid to do it? This honestly is already starting to happen. If you're hearing all this for the first time, I know you won't believe this because I didn't for a very, very long time. And it's not until you actually start converting prices into real money terms instead of using dollars that you see this is already happening in real time. This honestly isn't some far-fetched utopian future. It's already happening. So what would daily life actually look like if everyone works less? Instead of working a full-time job, plus finding a side hustle just to put food on the table, people would have the mental freedom to actually solve problems they care about, raise your own children and care for your elderly parents instead of paying others to do it. Finally, pursue the hobbies that you've always wanted to try, or start a business around things that matter to you. It would become the norm again to grow your own food and know exactly what you're eating. Now, I know you're probably thinking this sounds utopian and there's no way humans could live in a utopian world. But there's something that's never existed before. Money that governments can't mess with. For the first time in history, we have truly limited digital money that no one controls. It's called Bitcoin. And in places where people use it, we're already seeing glimpses of this future. When I was at Bitcoin Prague, I met people who haven't used a debit or credit card in years. They found themselves living on a Bitcoin standard in places like Madeira, Portugal, and their quality of life has increased dramatically in a relatively short period of time. On a personal level, when I went to Prague, I actually managed to live off Bitcoin for the few days I was there. These Bitcoin circular economies are also existing in more and more places, such as Lugano, Switzerland, Bitcoin Jungle, Costa Rica, and Bitcoin Berlin in El Salvador. But this isn't the magic of what a global free market could do. Here's a real example of a story I stumbled on recently. There's a Romanian DJ named Saylor who released his music directly on a blockchain platform instead of through Spotify. In 2 hours, he earned over $10,000 from 130 supporters, while giving them tokens that could become more valuable if his music takes off. Let me put that in perspective. A song with millions of plays on Spotify might earn $3,000 to $4,000 after the platform and record label take their cuts. But in a true global free market, everyone wins. Saylor gets paid fairly, fans get exclusive access and potential upside, no record label or platform takes 70% of the value for not really doing anything. Notice the pattern here. Every time we remove the middlemen and money manipulation, people compete to create value instead of competing to extract it. So what do we have here? Money that can't be printed, can't be controlled. Check out the previous video about the DOPES framework to learn more about this. And people get rewarded for creating real value. But when these things combine, they create something that has never existed before, a global free market. The question isn't whether this is possible anymore, because it's already happening. The question is, do you want to be part of building this world? Or do you want to keep playing musical chairs in the old system? This window for early adoption is closing fast. These circular economies are growing at a rate not seen before. Because in this new world, instead of fighting over a shrinking pie, everyone competes to make the pie bigger and cheaper for everyone else. And that's a world where money finally works for everyone. Listen, I get it, I still know what you're thinking. This sounds too good to be true. But what if I told you there are real people already benefiting from Bitcoin in ways that sound utopian? It turns out there are. And you need to watch this video next, where I'll show you exactly how Bitcoin is already changing people's lives, including a Kenyan barber who could afford an education for the first time thanks to Bitcoin, despite never owning any or even knowing what Bitcoin is. This is what rural Zambia used to look like after dark. Here's what it looks like now. And this barber did something that should be impossible. He bought himself an education using Bitcoin mining, and he's never owned or mined any Bitcoin. I used to think Bitcoin was just digital money for tech bros, but then I discovered it's actually transforming real lives in ways nobody talks about, including one story that doesn't just flip the Bitcoin destroys the environment narrative, it obliterates it completely. I guarantee you've never heard all of these stories before, and after today, you'll never look at Bitcoin the same way. But first, I grew up taking stable money for granted. The pound in my wallet, same value tomorrow. My bank account, always accessible. Then I learned about Fady. Fady is a 20-year-old Ukrainian who woke up on February 24th, 2022 to news that Russia had invaded his country. He needed to escape fast, but the ATM queues were impossibly long. Banks were frozen, he couldn't wait. So Fady did something incredible. He traded $600 worth of Bitcoin to a friend for Polish currency. Within hours, he was safely across the border with 12 words in his pocket. Good job too. Just 2 hours after he escaped, Ukraine sealed its border to all men of his age. But Fady's escape isn't even the craziest part. Wait until you hear what happened to his Bitcoin after he crossed the border. First, let me show you a young South African who said something that made me realize how real this is.
I was being paid in fiat. Sometimes my family used to take all my money in fiat.
Everything he worked for, gone. Then something changed. He started getting paid in Bitcoin.
No one can take Bitcoin away from me, and I'm very happy about it. It's really good.
For the first time in his life, he could actually keep what he earned. Anyway, back to Fady. Those 12 words in his pocket contained $2,000 in Bitcoin, 40% of his life savings. Over the next 6 months in Poland, while other refugees struggled with frozen bank accounts and currency exchanges, Fady's Bitcoin became his financial lifeline. Oh, and just so you know, if he kept that Bitcoin from 2022 to now, he would have around $10,000. Whether you're fleeing war, escaping financial abuse, or protecting earnings from family theft, Bitcoin works the same for everyone. No one can freeze your Bitcoin account, and no government can print more Bitcoin to devalue yours. But while seeing Bitcoin save families from financial control was powerful, what really blew my mind was discovering how people are using Bitcoin mining to bring electricity to places that never had it. This Kenyan village got electricity from Bitcoin mining, but the logistics of this seemed impossible until I understood how they actually did it. Picture a village in Kenya, no power lines, no electricity, ever. Then Bitcoin miners show up. But here's the crazy part. They don't just use energy, they create it. They built solar panels, diverted water from a river to drive turbines, set up batteries. They created a mini power grid. The miners run during the day when there's extra solar power. At night, the same infrastructure powers the village. Kids can study after dark, families can refrigerate food and medicine, small businesses can operate, all because Bitcoin mining made the economics work. Joe Nakamoto documented a hydro plant in rural Kenya doing exactly this.
This is a 533 kilowatt run-of-river hydro. What happened though is they had about 200 of those kilowatts spoken for by like the tea factory, by the community around.
What about the other 333? Before Bitcoin mining, that energy would go to waste.
They needed an off-taker that could take up the rest of it to make this a financially viable project.
Did you know renewable energy sources all over the world often turn off their power as too much stored in the batteries makes it unstable? Now, Bitcoin miners use the excess energy. This makes the whole project way more profitable. It incentivized people to come and build this infrastructure in the first place. Bitcoin mining is literally subsidizing the expansion of renewable energy worldwide. They're perfectly positioned to soak up this excess renewable energy. Plus, they provide a guaranteed buyer for surplus clean power. Remember Damien, the barber from our opening? His village got a similar setup. Bitcoin miners set up solar panels and batteries. During the day, excess energy powers the mining. At night, the same infrastructure gives Damien electricity to cut hair after dark. More working hours, more income. And for the first time in his life, he can afford school fees. But that's not the incredible part. Damien doesn't own Bitcoin. He doesn't mine Bitcoin. He just benefits from the infrastructure that Bitcoin mining made profitable. Joe met a woman who threw away her kerosene lamps 3 years ago. Why? She didn't need them anymore. Above her head now, a light bulb. In her living room, a TV. Compare this to South Africa. Even in Cape Town, they have something called load shedding.
So the decay of South Africa is kind of what you can expect to see in the rest of the world. So we're like leading the trend. Every house which has not a generator is basically black right now. It basically is not enough power because the government has a monopoly on producing electricity. Which means that if there's not enough energy available, they simply shut down whole parts of Cape Town. This is crazy, guys. I can't work, there's no internet, there's nothing.
In these remote villages with Bitcoin mining, they have their own power, independent grids. When a national grid fails, they still have electricity. Bitcoin didn't just use their energy, it created energy independence. But this isn't even the most surprising way Bitcoin is helping the environment. For 2 years, I felt guilty every time someone mentioned Bitcoin's carbon footprint. Then I discovered something that didn't just change my mind, it completely flipped everything I thought I knew about Bitcoin and the environment. Bitcoin miners are capturing methane that would have entered the atmosphere and converted it to value. It's like discovering your annoying neighbor's loud music is actually powering your house. Except instead of music, it's toxic gas. And instead of your neighbor, it's massive oil companies. Methane gas has more than 80 times the global warming power of carbon dioxide. So if you can convert methane into CO2, you actually help the environment. Landfills naturally produce methane during decomposition. Oil companies hit methane while drilling. What do they usually do with that methane? They burn it. Just waste it. But here's the crazy part. Bitcoin miners are capturing that methane before it gets flared or escapes. They use it to power Bitcoin mining rigs, right there in the landfill or oil site. Instead of waste, they create value. Instead of dangerous methane emissions, they generate Bitcoin and less harmful CO2. Companies like Nodal Power are doing this in the Rocky Mountains. They just raised $13 million to build more of these operations. Even the previous White House administration, which was skeptical about Bitcoin, admitted this works. Their official report said Bitcoin mining that captures methane can yield positive results for the climate. Yet what I'm about to show you next makes methane capture look boring. There's something even bigger happening here. Remember how Bitcoin mining can soak up the excess energy from renewable sources to incentivize more renewable energy in the world? This same flexibility helps during disasters. When Winter Storm Elliott hit Texas in 2022, Bitcoin miners shut down 1.5 gigawatts of power within minutes. That's enough electricity to power 300,000 homes, all redirected to help families stay warm during the crisis. Just think about this vision. Bitcoin mining operations on top of every landfill on the planet, powered by excess renewable energy, while making clean energy more profitable and ready to instantly redirect power to communities during emergencies. Bitcoin mining is literally cleaning up the environment. Who would have thought this if you listened to mainstream media? But hold on, if you think using waste methane is crazy, wait until you hear about the guy who sold his house to heat his home with Bitcoin. This story sounds like fiction, but I've actually got the receipts. Again, it's from Joe Nakamoto. Definitely check out his channel. I always thought Bitcoin mining was this big industrial thing. Warehouses full of loud machines, not something normal people could do. Then I discovered Steve in the UK, who did something that sounds completely insane, but actually works. Steve sold his house, everything he owned, to go all in on Bitcoin. But here's the crazy part. His heating bill? Zero. For 2 years straight. In fact, it earns him money. Steve lives in a caravan powered entirely by his solar panels, and his Bitcoin miners heat his entire home. Bitcoin miners are basically powerful computers solving math problems.
This is an S19 Bitmain ASIC miner. So you put electricity in, you get Bitcoin out, is the simplest way to explain it.
All that computing generates heat, lots of heat. Steve built something called a hush box to contain the noise. Then he ran tubes under his caravan to distribute the warm air. In the middle of winter, when it's -2 degrees outside, his caravan stays at
about 14, 15 degrees, something like that by itself. If I then turn on the one in the hush box inside the van, it generates more heat than you know what to do with, really.
Solar panels cover his entire roof. Batteries storing extra power. Miners running when there's excess energy. His Bitcoin earnings?
So estimated earnings a day, 0.000233, let's say.
So that's 24,000 sats, which is about 12, 13 pounds?
Yeah.
About £400 per month while heating his home for free. And get this, the tubes distributing heat around his caravan
were knitted by Steve's mum.
I'm not making this up. Steve's mum is literally crafting the infrastructure for the future of money. That's either the most British thing ever or the most Bitcoin thing ever. Maybe both. When asked why he went through all this hassle, Steve said,
everything that I'm doing now is building positively towards a future that I want to live in. And I think that if everybody else spends a little bit of time to learn about why the decisions I made aren't actually crazy, they're just the most sensible thing to do. It's the least risky path forward into the future.
His plan? In 4 years, build a community of off-grid caravans, all heated by Bitcoin mining. I'm seriously considering testing this myself. Just gotta convince the wife. Yeah. Now, I can already hear the comments, Mike, this sounds too good to be true. And honestly, I thought the same thing. So I spent way too many hours fact-checking every claim in this video. I encourage you to go down this rabbit hole yourself, so you're not just blindly trusting me. When I started researching Bitcoin, I thought it was just internet money. Digital gold, maybe. But these real-world use cases, they change everything. From Damien's barber shop in Zambia to Steve's heated caravan in the UK, from Ukrainian war refugees to Kenyan tea farmers, every story I just told you shares one invisible thread. And once you see this thread, you'll understand why Bitcoin isn't just an investment, changing individual lives. It's infrastructure. It's bringing electricity to people who never had it before. It's cleaning up environmental waste. It's protecting families from economic collapse. It's even heating homes while earning money. The more I learn, the more I realize we're just scratching the surface. But here's what really gets me excited. Did you notice how Bitcoin is changing people's lives despite them not owning any or even knowing what it is? From mums or barbers in Africa to every single one of us benefiting from less pollution around the world. And honestly, I could go on for hours about other use cases. Accessing money when corrupt governments try stopping them. Protecting your money's value against hyperinflation. Bitcoin towns and islands where everyone uses Bitcoin. Mining Bitcoin has helped protect endangered animals. People can send money overseas without big fees. People who have been cancelled can still use their own money without asking permission. Bringing tourists to small towns where they accept Bitcoin. And all this without including the two things you probably thought I was going to say when you clicked on this video. Countries like El Salvador that used Bitcoin as legal tender, and countries like the United States using it as a store of value. After seeing all these incredible stories, you're probably thinking, if Bitcoin is this revolutionary, why hasn't it taken over yet? That's the crazy part. Critics have been calling Bitcoin a bubble for more than 15 years, predicted it would crash to zero. Yet it just keeps growing. There's a mathematical reason why. So watch this video next to see why what they call a bubble is actually something that's never existed before. Something bigger than the early internet. Understanding this could be the difference between watching the greatest wealth transfer in history or being part of it. And once you see it, you'll understand why Bitcoin isn't just revolutionary, it's inevitable. Everyone keeps saying Bitcoin is a bubble about to burst. But what if I told you this bubble is actually unburstable? Look, I get it. You're probably wondering three things. First, how can any bubble be unburstable? Second, what makes Bitcoin different from every other bubble in history? And third, is there actual mathematical proof that shows this? This research cost me months of my life and drove my wife balmy because I was becoming obsessed with proving Bitcoin was a scam. Instead, I was humbled about what could be the biggest financial revolution of our lifetime. I discovered 5 pieces of mathematical evidence that don't just prove Bitcoin isn't a bubble, they prove it's something that's never existed before in financial history. Look, I'll be honest, I was a Bitcoin skeptic. I called it digital tulips to friends in 2018. That quote aged like milk in the sun. But this research completely changed my mind, and here's why. I always thought Bitcoin looked exactly like every bubble in history. The crazy price spikes, the crashes, the hype cycles. Then I learned what bubbles actually are mathematically. Real bubbles follow a specific pattern. They inflate with speculation, then they pop when reality hits. Think tulip mania in the 1600s, companies during the dot-com crash in 2001, or the housing bubble in 2008. Here's where it gets interesting. I spent way too long studying every major bubble in history, made charts, drew graphs, analysed the mathematical patterns based on historical data. Every traditional bubble had almost identical math. Price disconnects from value, speculation takes over, and then that was good.
Bitcoin follows the same bubble math, but repeats it on a schedule.
Think of bubbles like balloons filled with hot air. They expand fast, then burst completely, nothing left. Bitcoin is more like a tree growing. Fast growth spurts in spring, slower periods in the winter, but the root system keeps expanding underground. Trees don't just vanish. They build stronger foundations during every cycle.
Some people have different theories as to why these repeated schedules have happened, such as the halving cycle every 4 years for Bitcoin. But it also coincides with the liquidity cycle or the business cycle, which has happened every 4 years since 2008. It's too much to go into in this video alone, but I will link you a good video about cycles below if you want to know a bit more.
The first mathematical proof Bitcoin isn't a bubble.
It turns bubble patterns into a recurring feature, not a one-time death.
This alone changed my perspective, but wait until you see this pattern that made me question everything I thought I knew about Bitcoin. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sure, Bitcoin doesn't follow bubble math, but those crashes are still devastating. I believed Bitcoin crashes would get worse over time. Bigger bubbles mean bigger pops, right? More volatility, more destruction. That's how bubbles work. But when I mapped out Bitcoin's crash percentages over each cycle, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Each crash was actually smaller than the last one. 2013 crashed 85% from peak to bottom. 2017, 83%. 2021, 77%. But this is the part that blew my mind. Bitcoin's 2018 bottom of $3,200 was 180% higher than its entire 2013 peak of $1,150. The 2022 crash bottom at 15 grand was still within range of most of 2017's bull run. But Bitcoin isn't just getting less volatile. The mathematical foundation keeps strengthening, like a wild horse slowly being tamed, but also growing stronger. I double checked my math multiple times because I thought I made a mistake. But according to Glassnode data, this pattern is clear. Bitcoin's volatility is decreasing as adoption grows. This is the opposite of bubble behavior. Bubbles get more unstable as they grow. Bitcoin is becoming more stable. So mathematical proof number 2, each crash is smaller than the last, and each bottom is around levels of the previous peak.
And here's the kicker. In Bitcoin's 16-year history, you've never been underwater for more than 3 years, even if you've bought at the worst possible time. Bought in the 2013 peak, you recovered in just over 3 years. Bought in the 2017 peak, you recovered in 3 years. The 2021 peak, you recovered in 2 years, 4 months. Bitcoin has always come back, every single time. And the recovery is getting faster. Whereas traditional bubble investors have lost everything forever.
But wait until you see this next number. It's the one that convinced me I'd been completely wrong. When I dug deeper into where Bitcoin's money actually comes from, I found something that completely shattered my assumptions. Your financial advisor will hate this next chart because it proves everything they've told you about Bitcoin volatility is mathematically wrong. I literally stared at this chart for 10 minutes thinking I'd made a mistake. I always assumed Bitcoin was just people trading fake money back and forth, paper gains, digital gambling. Then I discovered something called realized cap from Glassnode research. Here's the difference that blew my mind. Market cap just multiplies today's Bitcoin price by how many Bitcoin exist. So if Bitcoin is $100,000 and there are 20 million Bitcoin, market cap says the whole thing is worth 2 trillion. But realized cap asks a much different question. How much real cash did people actually spend to buy all of this Bitcoin? It looks at every Bitcoin and says, when this specific Bitcoin last changed hands, what did someone pay for it? Then it adds up all those actual purchase prices and works it out. Think of it like this. If you bought a house for £200,000, but it's worth £500,000 today, how much real money did you actually spend? 200K, not 500K. That's what realized cap measures for Bitcoin. This reveals something incredible. During Bitcoin's worst crash in 2022, while the price was falling 77% from 68,000 to 17,000, realized cap declined only 19%. From 24,000 to 19,000. Think about what this means. The price collapsed, but the amount of real cash invested barely dropped. People weren't panic selling, they were buying the dip with real money.
Bitcoin's price is set by whoever's actually trading. It's like a neighborhood where 95% of homeowners aren't selling, but the few houses that do sell go for 50% less. Suddenly all houses are worth 50% less on paper. But here's the thing, Bitcoin is
like a store having a massive sale and people lining up to buy more stuff. That's not how bubbles work. In real bubbles, everyone runs away. Turns out those financial institutions telling you Bitcoin is risky speculation were quietly accumulating it behind closed doors.
Jamie Dimon says Bitcoin is a fraud. He says he'll fire any one of his traders buying Bitcoin. Bitcoin drops 24%. So that weekend, we found out that the largest buyer was Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan. And that's not illegal.
The third piece of evidence, real money keeps flowing into Bitcoin during crashes. Before you dismiss this, let me show you the actual numbers that convinced me this isn't speculation. Here's a stat that broke my brain. More computing power secures the Bitcoin network than Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple combined.
Plus, it uses more energy than many countries.
During the crash, this security increased.
Before you think this is wasteful, just as I showed you in video 7, over 50% of Bitcoin now runs on excess renewable energy and captures methane emissions, which is actually helping the environment.
Let me show you why these numbers matter. Hash rate is basically like network security. Think of hash rate as the total computing power protecting Bitcoin. More hash rate means more miners investing real money, electricity, equipment, etc., to secure the network. It's like measuring how many guards are protecting Fort Knox during a bank run. If it were just speculation, the guards would just go home when things got scary. Here's the shocking part. During every brutal bear market, when Bitcoin prices crashed, hash rate didn't collapse. Instead, it grew dramatically. In 2013, hash rate exploded 6,500% from 5 terahashes to 330. The 2017 bear market, hash rate surged 186%. From 14 exahashes to 40 exahashes. During the 2021 brutal crash, hash rate climbed another 67%, from 150 exahashes to 250 exahashes. Why does this matter? If Bitcoin were just speculation, miners would have unplugged their machines when prices crashed 80%. Instead, during the worst market conditions, they doubled down, investing billions more in equipment and electricity costs. But this isn't all. Active addresses measures how many unique wallets are actually transacting each day. Real people moving real Bitcoin for real purposes. During the 2013 bubble popping, active addresses increased from 150 to 310k, up 107%. When the 2017 crash happened, active addresses did drop, but down 55%, not 83%. The 2021 crash, active addresses dropped 42%, not 77%, from 1.25 million to 720,000. So there were still 720,000 active addresses using Bitcoin every day during the worst crash. Why does this matter? In every bubble I've studied, usage doesn't just decline, it goes to zero when the bubble bursts. Companies disappear, assets become worthless, and nobody uses them anymore. But here's what gets even more crazy and makes Bitcoin so different. No other asset class even has this kind of transparent usage data. You can't see real-time active users for gold, stocks, or real estate. Bitcoin's blockchain gives us unheard of visibility into actual utility. We're not just blindly guessing. And what we see is remarkable. High commitment during bad times doesn't equal speculation. It equals genuine value creation, as you can see in the video about real use cases for Bitcoin. So the fourth mathematical proof, network security and utility grow during market fear. This led me to realize why Bitcoin behaves so differently from every bubble in history. We need to compare Bitcoin to the right things. Bitcoin isn't a device like a smartphone, and it's not technology like Apple and Microsoft. Bitcoin is a protocol, like the internet, electricity, or the telephone itself. The telephone protocol took around 65 years to reach 50% adoption. Electricity took about 55 years. The internet took 33 years. Every protocol follows this S-curve. As Jeff Booth, author of The Price of Tomorrow, explains,
Bitcoin isn't within the system, it's outside the system, bounded by energy. It is repricing that entire system over time. Technologies are winner take most. Protocols are winner take all. Open protocols win. The last protocol anybody knows about would be the internet.
According to the data from 18 months ago,
we're at 6.8% global adoption for crypto.
So 562 million people, more than the entire population of North America,
now own crypto.
But when we look at USA adoption specifically, to compare apples to apples,
crypto was at about 15% adoption.
So it's likely around 20% today. Historically, once protocols hit 25 to 30%, the acceleration becomes unstoppable. But here's what's really crazy. According to BlackRock research, crypto adoption beats mobile phones by 43% and the internet by 20% at comparable stages. The internet hit mainstream adoption around 2002. We're currently where the internet was in 1993, and Bitcoin is growing faster than that. Do the math.
That means we're less than 9 years away from mainstream adoption.
And the growth is accelerating. Crypto ownership jumps 33% in 2023, with a compound annual growth rate of 99% since 2018. It far exceeds traditional payment methods, which on average grew by 8% growth during that time period. Cryptocurrency ownership growth surpassed payment giants like American Express and PayPal. That's not a bubble pattern. That's how genuine protocol innovations spread through society.
Hey, Future Mike here. Just wanted to say, note that this is crypto adoption, not Bitcoin only. There's still so few people that really understand what Bitcoin is. So even with this data, I think it just shows how incredibly early we actually are.
Now, I can almost hear you thinking, what if this time is different though? What if Bitcoin fails like MySpace or BlackBerry? Remember, here's the key distinction. MySpace and BlackBerry were devices and applications. Bitcoin is a protocol, like the internet itself or electricity infrastructure. Think of it this way. The internet is the protocol. It's the foundation that everything else builds on. But Internet Explorer, Facebook, and even Google are just technologies that use the internet. The internet itself never goes away, but the companies and apps built on top of it can fail. Bitcoin is like the internet. It's the foundational money protocol. Everything else is just built on top of it. Real bubbles don't follow S-curves. They spike and then disappear forever. Tulip Mania, Pets.com, Bear Stearns. They all collapsed and never recovered because they had no real utility driving adoption. Bitcoin keeps recovering to new highs because it's following the adoption curve of a revolutionary protocol, not the collapse pattern of a speculative bubble. So the fifth mathematical proof, it follows the S-curve of tech adoption. And if this S-curve is right, like all previous ones, we have maybe 5 to 10 years before Bitcoin hits 50% adoption in developed countries. And after that, the easy gains are over. Not financial advice. So what does all this mean? When I started this research years ago, I honestly was trying to prove Bitcoin was a bubble. The evidence overwhelmingly convinced me of the opposite. Bitcoin doesn't follow bubble math. Crashes are getting smaller over time. Real money keeps flowing in during downturns. Network usage and security grow with adoption. And we're still in the early stages of the steepest part of the S-curve. The math doesn't lie. Bitcoin isn't a bubble. It's the adoption curve of a new monetary system. If you see something different or can show me something I'm missing, I'd love to see it in the comments. But all of this means nothing if you're still thinking, okay, I'm convinced Bitcoin isn't a bubble, but that doesn't mean it's guaranteed to succeed, right? You're absolutely right. So I made a list of every single way Bitcoin could fail. Government bans, technical flaws, energy concerns, scalability issues, everything. What I found surprised even me. Most of the Bitcoin will fail arguments are based on outdated information, but a few, they're actually serious concerns every Bitcoin investor should understand. So watch this video next to see which threats are real versus which ones are just noise. Because even the strongest mathematical case means nothing if you don't understand the risks.
So Bitcoin has a 98% chance of succeeding, but that remaining 2% could quickly destroy a $1 trillion network. Most Bitcoin death predictions focus on the wrong threats entirely. Today I'm breaking down 4 risks that could actually kill Bitcoin and revealing why Bitcoin experts like Jeff Booth believe there's really only one existential threat that matters.
If Bitcoin did not successfully transition from a strictly store of value / savings technology into a used medium of exchange, that it was your opinion that it would fail.
It will fail.
It will fail.
I'm such a geek. I've been compiling this list of potential risks and threats to Bitcoin since 2020, diving into in-depth podcasts and Bitcoin literature that would make most people fall asleep. So I've simplified everything and put it together in a way that makes sense. Plus, I'll show you exactly which risks are pure fantasy versus the one subtle psychological trap that could quietly destroy Bitcoin from within. Ironically, the very thing that most Bitcoiners champion. But first, let me put these risks in perspective. Based on Jeff Booth's analysis and reading between the lines of what he and other experts are saying, here's how I break down Bitcoin's future. Over a 90% chance Bitcoin reaches universal adoption. As he puts it,
as long as it stays decentralized and secure, that system bounded by energy will reprice all $900 trillion of assets.
Less than 10% chance that it stays transitional. This means Bitcoin remains stuck in a hybrid system alongside traditional money. It stays valuable but never fully replaces fiat currencies. Think of it like how gold exists today. It's precious, but most people still use dollars for daily transactions. Then under a 2% chance of complete failure. In 2019, Jeff Booth estimated this failure risk was
about a 5% probability of failure. Was this different enough to withstand the worst in us? At first, that's why I said 5% probability of failure, is I didn't think so.
The failure risk keeps shrinking with each new user, each new business accepting it, each new country adding it to their reserves. So the fears I'm about to dig into, they're fighting over tiny slices of that current 2% failure probability. Before we get to the main risks, let's quickly address some fears that get way too much attention. AI will make Bitcoin obsolete. People worried that AI could grow so fast it finds a way to hack Bitcoin. But here's the thing, if AI can break Bitcoin security, it can break everything else first. Your bank, your credit cards, government systems, they all use weaker or equivalent security systems as Bitcoin. Plus, AI actually needs Bitcoin more than we do for machine-to-machine payments. But quantum computers will break Bitcoin. Same logic applies here. I recently spoke to an OG Bitcoin developer, Adam Back, about this at Bitcoin Prague. And the threat is real, just not anytime soon.
Because they're trying to finance great research, and it's tough, right? So they make a little breakthrough that's going to break Bitcoin, and they're trying to raise 100 million to build the next 6 billion.
That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Plus, quantum computers will also break your bank security, government encryption, and even nuclear missile launch codes before they touch Bitcoin. And that's because Bitcoin can upgrade its cryptography to be quantum resistant. But countries are going to ban Bitcoin. Countries have tried banning Bitcoin, just like parents tried banning TikTok. Good luck with that. The US government now owns 200,000 Bitcoin. Even China's ban didn't kill it.
Bitcoin is code, and code is protected by the First Amendment and free speech.
But environmental laws will shut down Bitcoin mining. Bitcoin mining actually incentivizes renewable energy. It even removes methane from the atmosphere. Banning it would be like banning solar panels for using sunlight. But what about if a better cryptocurrency replaces Bitcoin? Billions have been invested into Bitcoin's infrastructure, things like miners and nodes. It's like asking everyone to abandon the internet and start using a completely new network. Why would you throw away 12 years of zero downtime and rebuild everything from scratch? I've had all of these fears as well. I will dive into these in more detail in future videos, but when you go down those rabbit holes, you realize they're not actual real threats. But the real threats are much more subtle. So let's start with the fourth biggest threat to Bitcoin. Imagine waking up tomorrow and your Bitcoin is worthless, not because the price has crashed, but because a software update went wrong and froze the entire network. That's exactly what some people worried about during the SegWit wars in 2017. Here's what went down. Bitcoin developers created SegWit. It was an upgrade that would fix bugs and allow more transactions. Everyone wanted it, it made total sense. But mining companies fought it because it broke their profit optimization. So they launched a PR campaign claiming SegWit was breaking Bitcoin security. Now, there's a new upgrade being discussed at the moment, which would let you set spending rules and recovery periods on your Bitcoin. For example, you could set daily spending limits or create a 1-week delay before large amounts can be moved, giving you time to recover stolen Bitcoin. Again, it makes total sense. But here's where it gets interesting. These upgrades are even more complex than SegWit. More complexity means more ways things can go wrong. Bugs that break the network, arguments between different groups about how to implement it. The real risk isn't the technology, it's that upgrades could go wrong and cause problems. So updates going wrong is only a 3% risk. Why? Because Bitcoin's development process has gotten much more careful. But that's nothing compared to what I'm about to show you. This next threat is where things start to get more concerning. And this is what keeps some Bitcoin developers up at night. Here's the scenario. Bitcoin stays exactly like it is today forever. But isn't Bitcoin perfect already? It's digital gold. That's exactly the trap that could limit it. When people see Bitcoin only as digital gold, they stop caring about improvements. Why need better security features if you're just hodling? Why worry about storing your own Bitcoin if you never use it? But here's what the digital gold only crowd might be missing. Bitcoin is never finished. And what happens when quantum computing actually can steal someone's Bitcoin? So here's the real concern. Once people get comfortable with Bitcoin never changes, that becomes self-fulfilling. Developers stop working, users stop demanding better features. Bitcoin remains forever incomplete. It becomes a smartphone that can never improve. Notice the issue here? This threat comes down to centralization. When only digital gold holders have a voice in Bitcoin's future, you get centralized decision making. This is why stagnation is a 6% risk, while updates going wrong is only 3%. And if you thought that was concerning, wait until you hear this. Right now, 6 people could decide whether your Bitcoin transaction ever gets confirmed. 6 people control what happens to your money. That's worth considering. Have you ever wondered who actually processes your Bitcoin transactions? Most people have no idea. Here's the concerning reality. Just 6 mining pools control 95% of all Bitcoin blocks. According to research by B10C, if just the top 2 pools work together, they'd control over 62% of the network. That's enough for a 51% attack, which could mean they could spend their Bitcoin more than once. Now, would a mining pool actually attack? Probably not. It would be financial suicide. To control 51%, they'd have invested billions into mining equipment. The moment they attack, confidence collapses, price crashes, and their equipment becomes worthless. It's like spending $1 billion to rob a bank for $10 billion, but the robbery makes all the money you steal worthless. But here's the more subtle concern. You don't need dramatic attacks, just quiet, sneaky censorship that most people never notice. So here's the part most people might miss. 6 mining pools decide which transactions get confirmed and which get ignored. They could censor your payments. And you might never even know it's happening. This isn't theoretical. In 2021, Marathon Digital mined clean blocks that excluded certain transactions to comply with US regulations. Think about this. You want to send Bitcoin to someone the government doesn't like. Blocked. You want to make a transaction without giving your ID. Blocked. It's like having 6 people control every email server in the world. They decide which messages get delivered and which ones don't. This is centralized mining control. The good news? Mining pools like Ocean are fighting back against censorship. Ocean lets individual miners choose which transactions to include instead of the pool deciding for everyone. But mining centralization is still small fish compared to the main threat that's hiding in plain sight. Quick question, do you know where your Bitcoin is actually stored right now? If not, you may be contributing to this biggest threat. I'm about to show you how Bitcoin holders might be accidentally working against Bitcoin's original purpose, and most of them are celebrating while it happens. This chart might surprise you. In just 12 months, regular people lost 247,000 Bitcoin worth 25 billion to corporations. That's not a market crash, that's a wealth transfer. Now I know there probably are quite a few individuals who have just sold their Bitcoin to buy into an ETF, which baffles me as to why someone would do that. But here's the interesting part. Bitcoin holders celebrated every single day that this happened because it increased their fiat dollar portfolio values. But here's what's happening. Picture this. You find a treasure chest that no king, no government, no corporation can ever touch. It belongs to whoever holds it. But instead of using this treasure to buy things, you trade it back to the same kings you were trying to escape from because they promised to carefully look after it for you. And then what happens to your treasure? It ends up in the king's vault and suddenly it's not yours anymore. Here's the pattern that might be developing. You buy Bitcoin at $100,000, it hits 200,000, you sell for profits. But where does your Bitcoin go? Into corporate vaults, into ETFs, into Wall Street's hands. Every time BlackRock buys more Bitcoin, the price goes up. Bitcoin holders celebrate, they post rocket emojis, they call it adoption. But what they might be celebrating is handing the keys to their financial freedom to the same Wall Street firms that caused the 2008 financial crisis. It's like prisoners cheering while the jailers buy bigger locks. Look at that chart again. That's enough Bitcoin to control entire countries' economies. And 90% of new Bitcoin ETF money, it's all stored in just one company's vaults, Coinbase. Think about that. Billions of dollars in decentralized money, all in one building in San Francisco. So here's the concerning pattern. If nobody uses Bitcoin, then nobody's going to be running their own nodes, which means you're trusting companies like Coinbase to tell you exactly what's going on. Remember FTX? $8 billion vanished overnight. Mt. Gox lost 850,000 Bitcoin. If you didn't control your keys, you lost everything. This is what still concerns me. When corporations own most Bitcoin, they can vote to change Bitcoin's rules. They decide which transactions are allowed. We wouldn't even know it happened because we are not running software to check transactions ourselves. Remember, I mentioned the subtle psychological trap that could quietly destroy Bitcoin from within. It's the exact thing that everyone cheers when Michael Saylor or Donald Trump say,
You do not sell your Bitcoin.
Never sell your Bitcoin, right?
It's the meme that we all love, hodling. This exact thinking may actually become Bitcoin's downfall, because by doing this and not spending it, we encourage the centralization of ownership over Bitcoin. Just remember, we can always just buy it back tomorrow with dirty fiat. So bad updates happen when development centralizes. Bitcoin gets stuck when only digital gold holders have a voice. Mining takeovers succeed when pools get too big. But this centralized ownership control risk is the mother of all threats. Why? Because it makes people stop caring about decentralization entirely.
Jeff Booth says it repeatedly.
If it stays decentralized and secure. If it stays decentralized and secure. If it stayed decentralized and secure. It is repricing that entire system. It's outside the system repricing it. And you couldn't change it. And it was bounded by energy. Wouldn't it describe the first global free market that ever existed?
That's the key. If it stays decentralized.
And I don't say if it stays decentralized and secure to think that there's risk of it not. I say that so people will do their own work to understand why they are become part of that network that ensures it stays decentralized and secure.
Now, I know this video might have you worried about Bitcoin, but remember, this is only that tiny 2% failure possibility we talked about. After meeting thousands of Bitcoiners at recent conferences, it's clear how many people are committed to making this change happen. And they're adopting it exactly like we need them to. As long as enough people run their own nodes, there's currently 22,000 nodes, and mining pools like Ocean keep doing what they're doing, it will stay decentralized and secure. And here's what Jeff thinks now.
I actually can move my time into the system. And if I choose this, it doesn't matter what everybody else, as long as there's enough people who are choosing this, it's protected. Yeah. And then more and more people would do that.
And if you want to help support the first global free market that has ever existed, there are 3 really simple things that you could consider right now. To see what these are, you need to watch this video here. There's also an extra thing in there that could really help with this, and it is completely free to do. It's just that most people have no idea where to even start. Bitcoin was supposed to take power away from banks and corporations. So why are companies like BlackRock and Strategy now holding more Bitcoin than entire countries? There are 3 simple things that could change Bitcoin's future, and you can do all of them today. But here's what most Bitcoiners actually do. They buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, leave it there, check the price 47 times a day, post "have fun staying poor" on Twitter. Meanwhile, the 3 simple things that could really help Bitcoin, most people just haven't gotten around to them yet. Now, the 3 things I'm about to show you are all important, but there's actually one thing that matters more than all of them combined for Bitcoin's future. I'll be honest, it's not as simple as the first 3, but I'll explain why it might be the most important thing any of us can do. But first, let's start with the basics. You've probably heard,
If you don't control the keys, it's not your Bitcoin. Your keys, your Bitcoin. Not your keys, not your Bitcoin.
Everyone knows this, but many people haven't taken this step yet. Often because it seems complicated until you do it. But here's why this really matters. First, exchanges fail. FTX, Mt. Gox, Celsius. When they go down, your Bitcoin disappears forever. Second, you don't actually own it. On exchanges, you just have an IOU. They control the keys. They control your Bitcoin. They can freeze your account anytime. And third, every Bitcoin on exchanges strengthens the centralized system you wanted to escape. According to Glassnode, approximately 3 million Bitcoins sit on centralized custody, exchanges and ETFs combined. That's about $315 billion not truly owned by the people who think that they do. But it's too complicated. Actually, it's more straightforward than you might think. Buy any hardware wallet, Trezor, Coldcard, Bitkey, whatever. When it arrives, go on YouTube and type your wallet name tutorial. It's honestly as easy as setting up a Facebook account. Remember how intimidating it was to learn to drive? Now you do it without thinking, and it gives you so much more control over your own life. It's just daunting because it's the unknown. Look, you don't have to move your entire stack. Start with an amount that you're comfortable with. Just prove to yourself you can do it. This is by far the most important step for every Bitcoiner to make. If you've watched any of these previous videos, there's a chance you have bought Bitcoin to escape the traditional financial system. Yet, many are still letting someone else control their keys. When you leave Bitcoin on exchanges, you're literally strengthening the system you're trying to escape. So first up, hold Bitcoin on cold storage. Now here's something that might surprise you. Even people who do self-custody often miss this next opportunity. Actually spend some. Because when we never spend Bitcoin, we're accidentally telling the world it isn't actually money. It's just a speculative asset. You don't need to spend your entire stack. You can spend and replace. Spend $20 worth, then replace it with the fiat that you would have used. Real world uses increase demand, encouraging more people to accept it and use it. But nobody near me accepts Bitcoin payments. So what can I actually do? First, download a Lightning app like Strike, Wallet of Satoshi, or BitKit.
So whenever the opportunity comes, you'll be ready. You can also find businesses that accept Bitcoin using bitcoinmap.org. And did you know you can use BitRefill, you can find this on the Strike app, to buy gift cards or top up your account for places that you normally spend money? The infrastructure is growing fast and more people are starting to use it every day, including whole communities who literally live on a Bitcoin circular economy. The Lightning Network processed 100 million transactions in Q1 2025, which was a 28% jump from the previous quarter. Here's the thing though, we have this amazing infrastructure being built, but many of us haven't had the chance to try it out yet. Even buying a coffee with Bitcoin does more for adoption than tweeting "Bitcoin fixes this" 1,000 times. Every transaction proves Bitcoin works. Every purchase creates demand. Plus, when you spend Bitcoin and it actually works smoothly, you become the best advertisement Bitcoin could ask for. I had a ton of comments about tax, and I will do a better dedicated video to this in the future, but just understand that obviously there are different places that have different tax laws, so I don't know everything at all. But the point is, you probably can still afford to spend a couple of $100s of Bitcoin a year and have very minimal implications on your tax bill. For example, in the UK, there's around £3,000 capital gains tax allowance each year. And honestly, just doing a little bit really does make a big difference. But also, if you are in the US, you can use apps like Strike, where you can literally live on a Bitcoin standard and then it automatically pays off your bills. So you could just pay on a credit card all month. At the end of the month, Bitcoin pays off your credit card. If you do this over a long enough time period, you're not going to worry about the taxes, because if you are paying taxes, then that money that would have just been sat in your bank account has earned you more money. But you just got to do a little bit of digging on this, because personally, I think this is important enough to figure out. When you go back to the video on how Bitcoin fixes the broken money, you'll see exactly what I mean about this being important. But I mean, let's face it, eventually we all want to get to a situation where we can just receive Bitcoin and spend Bitcoin, and that is what the money is. But I'm enough of a realist to understand the headache of taxes. Okay, you've secured your Bitcoin and you found a way to spend some. But before I show you the one thing that has the biggest impact on Bitcoin's future, there's one more simple action that costs $0. I'll be honest, this one may feel awkward at first, but it's surprisingly effective over time. Walk into your local coffee shop, restaurant, or store.
Do you accept Bitcoin? Still no. You know what you can save on the fees though? Yeah. You can actually just download it on your phone.
That's it. Just plant the seed. You don't need to convince them there on the spot. Just making them aware the option exists is a massive improvement. Bitcoin Map shows there's around 18,000 businesses worldwide accepting Bitcoin as payment, and that number keeps growing. If anyone asks you for more information, you can point them to companies like Bridge to Bitcoin. They have more information and support for any questions they may have. I've personally had friends with businesses who have either started accepting Bitcoin payments using apps like Wallet of Satoshi, or are seriously looking into it for e-commerce. Every conversation matters. Every future purchase creates a success story they can share. And that's how a network grows, one person at a time. All right, here it is. The thing that would have the biggest impact on Bitcoin's future. The thing that actually keeps Bitcoin decentralized and secure isn't buying it or spending it. It's becoming part of the network itself. Do you know what I'm about to say? Running a Bitcoin node. Here's why this matters more than anything else. Running your own node means you become part of the network that keeps Bitcoin decentralized, and you can verify transactions yourself without trusting anyone else. There's no banks, no payment processors, no one else involved in your transactions. It's literally like handing cash to a friend, but online. Eventually, you can route your own transactions through your node instead of relying on other people's infrastructure, like Coinbase or Binance. I know that might sound technical and intimidating, but it's easier than you might think. You've really got two main options. The easy way, just buy something like the Start9 or Umbrel with everything pre-installed. It will cost a few $100s, but it's basically plug and play. I'll link a setup tutorial below. Or you can go the DIY route. Use your existing computer and watch the 5-minute tutorial I'll link below. But, and this is important, you'll need an SSD hard drive to store it.
I tried it on a regular HDD and it took over a week to download, then crashed and I had to start all over again. Running your own node is exactly what Jeff Booth means when he says,
we are both the map and the territory.
In simple terms, instead of relying on banks or governments to control our money system, the territory, we become the actual infrastructure, the map, that makes Bitcoin work by running our own nodes. Here's why this really matters.
If it stays decentralized and secure, it is repricing that entire system.
He emphasizes the if, not because he's worried about it getting centralized, but because he wants us to figure out how to keep it secure ourselves. In other words, individual actions like running nodes and self-custody keep Bitcoin secure. And thousands of people are already doing it, and the number is growing rapidly. Hence, it keeps getting more decentralized and more secure. Okay, slightly techie disclaimer here, but I think it's really needed. I also need to mention something that I didn't cover in my previous video. There is another real risk to Bitcoin at the moment, and it is node centralization. Remember, centralization is basically the common thread for all the real risks that exist to Bitcoin. It's been quietly happening, and it's actually become way bigger since I actually made the video. But before you worry, here's the really important thing to be aware of, which really proves how minuscule these risks really are. The Bitcoin community is incredibly aware of all of these risks, and they adapt fast. See, Bitcoin Core, which is the main software used for running Bitcoin nodes, notice how over 99% of all nodes running were using Bitcoin Core just last year. Core has been allowing more and more spam onto the network, which basically just uses up way more storage space when you're running a node. That means that you're going to need bigger hard drives, aka more expensive equipment to store everything. This just makes it harder for regular people like you and me to run nodes, and more costly. And when fewer people can afford to run nodes, the network becomes more centralized, exactly what we don't want. But look what's happening. Bitcoin Nostr, which is another node software, which is better at filtering out spam and allowing only real money transactions through, has gone from around 3% to over 17% of nodes in just the last few months. People are switching because Nostr keeps Bitcoin focused on what it's supposed to be, money, not a storage system for junk. This is exactly why I say the risks are minuscule. The Bitcoin community sees problems coming and takes action to fix them. That's how we keep Bitcoin secure and decentralized. I'll link a couple of videos below if you want to learn a bit more about this. Right, this sounds great, but here's what I still worry about. Will normal, hardworking people benefit from Bitcoin in the short term, or just the big institutions? You know what would be disappointing? Bitcoin hits millions of dollars per coin, but it's just digital gold sitting in corporate vaults while regular people still can't use it for daily transactions. Sure, your number might have gone up, but the truly global free market that could help everyone, see video 6, is still decades away. So the choice is yours. You can help build the first global free market in human history that no government or corporation can control, or keep playing their game while they decide what happens to your money. We're literally living through history right now, and most people have no clue. Think about it. Every revolutionary technology faced the same criticism. Mobile phones would never replace regular phones. They're too expensive. The internet would never replace newspapers. Even Thomas Edison said electricity was a waste of time. Nobody will use it, ever. But they all won. Because when something solves real problems, it takes over. There's actually a rule, like a law of nature, that explains how these world-changing inventions spread. And many Bitcoiners haven't even heard of it yet. Once you see this pattern, you'll understand why every country trying to ban Bitcoin actually makes it stronger. To see why, you need to watch this video here. Because Bitcoin isn't just possible anymore, it's inevitable. You know that moment in Avengers where Thanos clicked his fingers and half the universe just vanished? Well, Bitcoin's about to do something similar, except instead of people disappearing, it's going to be every other currency on the planet. I know that sounds crazy, but hear me out. Most people think Bitcoin is just another get-rich-quick scheme. They're missing the bigger picture. What we're actually witnessing is the end of money as we know it. I'm going to walk you through 4 reasons why Bitcoin taking over the dollar, euro, yen, every currency isn't just possible, it's inevitable. And I'm not talking about some distant future. This is happening right now.
while you're watching this. Understanding this could be the difference between riding the biggest wealth transfer in history or watching your savings get destroyed by a dying system. So here's the first reason Bitcoin is inevitable. Picture this, you're playing Monopoly with someone who keeps sneaking extra money from the bank when you're not looking. Eventually that money becomes worthless, the game breaks down and everyone stops playing. Now imagine that cheater is your government and the game is your entire financial life. This has destroyed every form of money throughout history. Every civilization follows the same 3-step collapse cycle. And once you see it, you'll realize we're about to witness the biggest monetary shift in over 50 years. Here's how it works. Step 1, the sound money era. The government backs their money with something scarce, like gold or silver. People trust it because they can actually exchange it for real value. The system works, everyone's happy. Step 2, the printing era, where smart money flees. The government abandons that backing and starts printing money. They always have a good reason: war, crisis, emergency measures. It's always supposed to be temporary. But here's the key. While governments are printing, smart money quietly escapes to harder assets. Step 3, the collapse or mass exodus. The currency becomes worthless. Regular people finally wake up and there's a mad scramble for the exits. Everyone desperately flees to harder money. This pattern has never failed, not once in 2,000 years. Take Rome. They had a silver-based monetary system from 211 BC until Emperor Nero started debasing the currency in 64 AD by mixing copper into the silver. When this happened, wealthy Romans hoarded the pure silver coins while spending the debased ones, contributing to the Western Empire's collapse by 476 AD. Germany abandoned gold in World War I to fund the war. Rich Germans positioned themselves first, borrowing marks to buy hard assets before hyperinflation hit. When ordinary people were fighting over scraps of the foreign currency, the wealthy were already safe, paying off their debts with worthless paper. By 1924, thieves would dump out suitcases full of cash and steal the suitcase. It was worth more than the money inside. Britain ditched gold in 1931. America accumulated all the gold reserves after 2 world wars, and Britain lost the reserve currency status to the US dollar by 1944. And the United States? Nixon temporarily suspended gold backing in 1971 because countries kept demanding gold for their dollars, which the US didn't have. 54 years later, we're still waiting for that temporary measure to end. You see the pattern? Every empire abandons sound money during a crisis, promising it's temporary. None ever go back. But here's what's different this time. When America abandoned gold, the whole world had to follow, because the dollar was the world's reserve currency. Every country on earth is now trapped in this experiment for the first time in human history. And as even Wikipedia says, fiat currencies have no value. Here's the crazy part. We're deep into step 2 right now. When Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, the money supply was around 650 billion. Today it's almost 22 trillion. That's a 34x increase in just 54 years. But look at that vertical spike starting in 2020. We added more money in 2 years than existed in the entire economy for the first 200 plus years of America. We're not just in step 2, we're accelerating toward the cliff. And just like in every previous collapse, smart money is already moving. Tesla and MicroStrategy bought first 5 years ago. Now, the biggest government in the world just joined them. March 6, 2025, the US government created a strategic Bitcoin reserve. They called Bitcoin digital gold and said there's strategic advantage to stockpiling it before other countries do. When this government is buying Bitcoin, the writing's on the wall. Think about this. The US government, the same one that banned gold ownership, now calls Bitcoin a strategic asset. They know they can't control it, and I'll show you exactly why later, but they sure can benefit from it. Meanwhile, when I was in Sri Lanka recently, I watched step 3 happening live. Shopkeepers only wanted US dollars. They wouldn't touch their own rupees. That's what the mass exodus looks like. This same pattern has played out throughout history. People fleeing to US dollars during hyperinflation, cigarettes around World War II, even seashells instead of the usual bartering. When people can choose, they always flee to harder money. But what happens when the world doesn't want dollars anymore? What will they flee to? Could it be gold? Maybe, but it would need to be repriced by 25 times overnight to absorb all the excess money. Plus, governments can confiscate gold like they did in 1933. And a handful of banks manipulate gold prices by selling paper promises for gold that doesn't exist. Bitcoin has none of these problems. Fixed supply, nobody can increase. Digital, so it can't be confiscated. Completely outside government control. Bitcoin shatters this 2,000-year cycle. We now have money that can't be debased, can't be printed, and can't be taken away. Can you imagine losing over a third of your savings in 5 years because your government decided to print money? Because that's exactly what's just happened. Your grandparents could buy a house on 1 salary. Your kids might not afford rent on 2 salaries. And you're wondering why it feels harder just to live. Step 2 of the smart money exodus is already well underway. When the next crisis hits and regular people wake up, we'll see the mad scramble. Regular people will flood into the hardest money we've ever seen, just like they flooded into foreign currency in Germany and gold in 2008. Smart money moves first, and we're watching that happen in real time. This window won't stay open forever. But here's where Bitcoin is different from every other monetary takeover in history. Think about your electricity. Could you create a better power grid tomorrow? No. Because your house, your neighbour's house, every business is already wired for the current system. To switch everyone over, you'd need to replace every power plant, every wire, every device. The switching cost is massive, and Bitcoin works exactly the same way. The miners, they're like power plants for money. Billions of dollars of equipment all running the same system. Want to switch to a different cryptocurrency? You need to convince all the miners to scrap all that equipment and start over. And look at Bitcoin's hash rate. That's basically the total computing power securing the network. It's grown over 1,000 times in the last decade. That represents billions in specialized equipment that only works for Bitcoin. Each new person joining makes switching even more expensive and unlikely. That's not a monopoly. That's just how protocols work. They are winner takes all, not winner takes most like technology companies. Microsoft and Apple can coexist. Meta and Google can coexist. But protocols? There's only one internet, one electricity system, one telephone network. Here's what's crazy. For the first time ever, you can own a piece of that protocol. Think about that for a second. What other investment lets you own pieces of the actual protocol that runs the world? If you could go back to 1995 and buy shares in the internet itself, not just companies using it, but the actual internet, would you do it? Because that might be exactly where we are with Bitcoin today. Now here's the question everyone asks. What if the government just bans Bitcoin? Here's the thing, they've tried. China banned mining, miners moved to Texas. India banned it 3 times, then gave up and regulated it instead. Why do bans keep failing? Throughout history, governments have killed every form of money using 2 methods. 1, physical confiscation. In 1933, they made gold illegal and went door to door, taking it from people. And 2, central control. Governments either take direct control of money creation, like Roman emperors debasing coins, or Weimar Germany printing marks, or they grant exclusive monopoly power to a central authority. Before 1913, private banks could issue their own currency, but then the US created the Federal Reserve, which at the same time gave them monopoly control over every currency. Bitcoin breaks both attacks. Attack 1, try confiscating something that only exists in your head. Bitcoin is just 12 words you memorize. Someone literally walks through airport security carrying $1 million worth of Bitcoin. Just 12 words in their head. Now try doing that with gold bars. Attack 2. Bitcoin has no center to control, no CEO, no headquarters. Instead, over 22,000 computers in 195 countries protect it. To shut it down, you'd need every government to coordinate at the same time. That includes China and America. Good luck with that. Plus, Bitcoin is just math. Courts have already ruled that code is protected by speech under the First Amendment. As long as there's a single country anywhere in the world that protects free speech, Bitcoin cannot be banned everywhere. Remember 2008 when Lehman Brothers collapsed and people couldn't access their money for days? or when banks in Cyprus just took 10% of everyone's deposits in 2013. With Bitcoin, your money exists on thousands of computers simultaneously. There's no single point of failure. It's designed to survive anything, including governments. But here's the thing, Bitcoin doesn't even need to win the fight. The dollar system is destroying itself. The US pays over $1 trillion annually just on interest for the national debt. That's more than they spend on defense, and it's catching up to what they spend on healthcare. That's just interest payments on money they've magically made up. And it's getting worse at a scary rate. In a true free market, everything should get cheaper every year. Your phone gets more powerful and cheaper every year. So does your laptop, your car, pretty much everything touched by technology. And when you look at Bitcoin versus dollars over the last 8 years, you can see what a free market looks like. One Bitcoin bought a used old banger in 2017, about $7,000. Today, that same one Bitcoin buys a new Tesla Cybertruck, about $100,000. Here's the pattern. Throughout history, when people can choose between strong money and weak money, they pick strong money every time. This is Gresham's law. People always keep hold of the good money and they spend the bad money. Nixon had to abandon gold in 1971 because other countries kept demanding gold, the good money, for their dollars, the bad money. And the US didn't have enough gold. Rome couldn't maintain gold coins alongside debased coins. People hoarded the good ones. Venezuela can't maintain bolivars when people have access to dollars. Two money systems competing, the weak one always loses. So ask yourself, do you want your money to lose value every year fighting technological progress, or gain value every year benefiting from it? That choice is happening right now.
People are trapped in a jail cell, right? Screaming at their captor while the jail cell is open because you have an open monetary, you have an open protocol. So they just would walk over any single person on the planet.
Now do you see why I called this inevitable? We've just walked through 4 unstoppable forces converging at once. Each reason alone makes Bitcoin likely. All 4 together, Bitcoin becomes inevitable. Could I be wrong? Of course I could be wrong. But if I am, please show me one solid argument as to why Bitcoin won't do this. I genuinely would love to see it, and I'm yet to see it from anyone who has actually been down the rabbit hole. Look, I know I'm making this sound certain, and there are still real risks that could derail Bitcoin. You can see those in the previous video. But here's the bottom line. As long as people keep adopting Bitcoin and actually using it as money, which you can see happening in video 7, then yes, this really is inevitable. The only way Bitcoin fails to become the first ever global free market is if normal people like you and me let it happen. Plus, the existing circular economies and people already living on a Bitcoin standard today need to stop and go back to fiat. And that's just not happening. Here's Jeff to explain this in his own words.
I certainly didn't understand Bitcoin like I understand it now. I assumed it had about a 5% probability of failure. Some of the questions that people ask today, why it'll centralize, why it'll fail, I went through all of the same things. If 5,000 years we've never had a decentralized, secure protocol bounded by energy, and was this different enough to withstand the worst in us? At first, that's why I said 5% probability of failure, is I didn't think so. I didn't think, as all of these attacks came, that this could stay decentralized and secure. And then as I got way deeper, I realized because of the way the nodes work, because of the way the free market works, I actually can move my time into the system. And if I choose this, it doesn't matter what everybody else does. As long as there's enough people who are choosing this, it's protected.
Yeah.
And then more and more people would do that. And so that's what you're seeing. You're seeing more and more people move their time into this network protocol. We are all nodes. We are literally Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And the more and more of us that are moving into it, the stronger it becomes.
Yeah.
The question is whether we understand this and are brave enough to do something about it before it becomes obvious to everyone else. We're watching the first peaceful monetary revolution in history unfold. One of the most common questions I got asked in these videos was, how do I practically start with all of this? My answer is just to use the simplest investing strategy ever invented. And it feels like cheating. To see what this is, you need to watch this video here. For the first time ever, we might actually see what happens when 8 billion people can trade freely without anyone controlling the money. And remember, the click is coming.